Good morning. You are here with Future Forward. This is Teresa Spangler here, the CEO of Plaza Bridge Group, and I'm thrilled to be bringing you our Future Forward session this morning, where we are going to talk about strategies to just help you through all these uncertain times with some really bright minds around the room today, and I'm excited to share this. So I first want to make a few introductions. Let me start with Talila Millman. And Talila and I have gotten to know each other over the past month or two. And I'm really excited to have you join us as your transformational CTO experience and your experience in AI and machine learning, data analytics and cloud and IoT and all these incredible technology disruptive things that are happening today, which your experience in bringing those into products or leveraging them inside the company. So we're excited to have you join us today. I think we'll follow that with Maura Connor. And Maura is she partners with CEOs and their executive teams to translate their visions into long-term strategies and help them come to fruition. Building again roadmaps and is focused on strategic and flawless execution, which we all know is so much an important part of our strategies these days, some of the missing links. And then we'll go to Julia. And Julia, we are thrilled to have you join us too, which you also help leaders build and market purpose-driven brands, which I love. And this is a purpose-driven session today. And everything that I love doing is, I think all of us here are driven by a purpose, which is great. And creating value. And so you inspire and influence executive teams around vision and strategy and metrics and values. And I love that. And then we will go to Lisa, last but not least. And Lisa is an influential chief product officer who identifies the innovative growth opportunities and creates products, culture, messaging, partnerships for companies to help them succeed. And these are wonderful traits that we want to share strategies because we've all been in the rooms, either leading companies or supporting the leaders of companies to help them through times like this. And I think all of our experiences, we've had those very dark, uncertain times. And this session is what can we do to bring some kind of light and inspiration and some insights to all the things that are going on today. So I think with that, I do want to give each of you a chance to share that, what that special thing about you is. And again, I'll go with Talila because you are right there next to me. And share that special, what's important to you? Tell me something about you personally that really drives you. And why are you here today?
I thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity of being here, Teresa. I'm very excited about this panel, the opportunity to exchange opinions with all these accomplished women here, accomplished executives. Really, the things that I find the most exciting is transformation and figuring out how to grow organizations, either through introducing new products and exciting technologies, or through improving the bottom line, improving business processes, and finding productivity and efficiency. So it's really about transformation and growth.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. And we're going to talk much more about that in our question and answers today. Maura, you want to share a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. And I'll echo Talila. Thank you so much for this opportunity to appear here today with such a great panel. I suspect we may all have variations of that same theme in terms of our passion for helping ease organizations through the process of change and transformation. For me, I really I get inspired by learning all I can about a company and their product and their customers, and helping them realize that vision and execute that vision for the organization. My superpower is the ability to bounce between that visionary level and the execution. Or as they say, I can see the whole forest, but I can also navigate every weed in the forest.
That's awesome.
And I can move back and forth between those, which really is quite a superpower when you're trying to help a company put those processes into place or streamline the execution of their strategy.
Excellent, excellent. And thank you for that. And yes, execution, tying strategy to execution is critical. And we've all experienced both challenges and probably know what it takes to make that happen. Joy, you want to share your secret power and your a little bit about you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Great to be here. I create opportunity and value by bringing humanity to business. I think we've forgotten that people make up companies, and when we connect those people and their ideas and their strategies and make a clear vision and values, we work better together. We feel connected, and I think when we feel connected to each other and to purpose, we feel more alive and more productive, more successful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Excellent. And let's go to Lisa.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. Like everyone else, I'm really excited to be part of this panel and associated with this group. I talk about using product strategy to unlock roadblocks and drive scale. And sort of one of the particular ways that I do that is really the ability to find the through lines in a lot of information and often a lot of competing information from various parts of the business. And so that instead of reacting to each one individually, we put that together, figure out, what does all of that mean and what are things we can do that will sort of address underlying problems in the most scalable and sort of elegant way. And I think the type of environments that we're facing now and the headwinds that we're facing now, right, that's another set, right, of those data points and difficulties that we can integrate into the planning in ways that, are mission driven, right, and are human centered and don't include dark patterns, and we don't have to do bad to do good.
And well, Lisa, you're offering a great segue into our very first question. And we're, as we know, I will have all of your backgrounds when we post the podcast up, and especially on LinkedIn. So I think what we'll do is let's go ahead and ask a couple of questions, and then we'll go into some free form conversations about these strategies as well. But I think some of the things that we were getting feedback on from CEOs and where struggles are actually happening. And I think the very first one is that, in uncertain times, companies and their people feel so vulnerable. And it's such a dark news time. We're getting just dark news all the time. So leadership styles and strategies may need to change. And we're constantly talking about change. It gets fatiguing to talk about change, but it's necessary. So can we share some examples? Can you guys share some examples where you would find those most valuable changes, and how might leaders evolve as opposed to it being maybe even such a drastic change? Sometimes drastic is necessary, but how might there be some evolutionary changes that could be made? And maybe Lisa, since you kind of kicked off our transition, you could start with some thoughts that you have there.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about leadership styles, it's really easy to get caught up in sort of theory, right? My theory is this leadership style is good. And that might be what's popular at the moment, right? Which particularly now, I think there's a lot of talk around servant leadership. It might be something that you think really aligns well with your personality. It might be something that has succeeded for you in the past, but attachment to sort of a defining leadership style can also have a downside in the sense that, like anything else, this is context specific.
Yeah.
And so what does your team need of you right now, right? What kind of runway do you have? Being a servant leader it's a great thing. It also means that certain things can take a little bit more time, to come to fruition.
Yeah.
And so when we have that runway, we can give people a little bit more of that chance to grow or to take leadership or to take time to think of ideas, come back and vet them and see if they're okay. But it may be that when we're facing headwinds, we don't have that kind of time. And so we might have to operate a little bit differently. We might have to sort of do a little bit more of that standing at the front, holding up the flag, saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, follow me. And the question, I think, as you said, is really, how do you turn that into an evolution, right? How do you do that so that people understand the context of what you're doing and why? So you can be really honest and transparent. You can say, hey, we're facing these headwinds. This is the situation. We don't have a lot of time. So here's what I think we should try right away.
Right.
And you can present that in ways that are actually reassuring, and people often will be very grateful to be given those guardrails and creative constraints because they don't want to flail and wonder what's going to be. So you can change your leadership style in ways that continue to be transparent and supportive.
Excellent. So Talila or Maura or Julia, would you add anything? You want to add, Talila?
Yes, I really love everything that Lisa said. I don't think it's about one leadership style or another. I think the most important thing for a leader at any time, but especially during time of change and turbulence, is to communicate and make it very clear to the team what direction they see and what, align people around the mission, the vision, and where the organization needs to be going, and what is the role of each and every individual in this change. I'd like to give an example. Recently during COVID, we came up with products that we wanted to take to market to help the COVID fight. And we communicated very clearly with the team what is the purpose, what we're doing, and how it aligns with our missions and values. And that we had the entire group align around it. The mission was clear. It was clear how it helps everyone, not just the company, but the value that we would bring. And people, we didn't have to ask people to work harder or to be more productive. I mean, people just wanted to contribute, wanted to do, and we were able to bring this product to market in half the time that it usually takes us to bring to market because of the enthusiasm and the that we had around this. So I think that's the important thing. If you can show the mission, if you can show the value that you bring, and you communicate clearly, then people will align and will perform.
I think you're bringing back up that purpose. They want purpose too. So in those times that are so dark, why am I here and what can I contribute? But you've got to engage me to do that. Julia or Maura, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think how I would wrap that up, I totally agree with everything that's been said. And I think what people are feeling is uncertainty and fear. So how do we move them out of that? And what comes up after hearing, or right now for me, is kind of 4 C's: commitment, commitment to purpose and to the team, and clarity, like being really, really clear about what we're doing, where we're going, who's doing what. Consistency, they're looking for stability in a time of uncertainty. And then also communicate, over communicate in times of uncertainty.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I was just going to jump in because that's a great segue to what I was thinking. Again, I agree with everything you all have said. On the point of communication, I think there's both the important role of the leader holding that flag forward and doubling down on the mission and vision, but then through a two-way communication as well, because it's not just cascading the information, it's also eliciting feedback, eliciting information. And I think leaders at every level, leaders of people should take the time to invest in one-on-one conversations. It may not be scalable across a large organization, but when you take the time to invest in someone and listen to their feelings, to their opinions, to their experience, it demonstrates as a leader your empathy and your approachability, which then develops trust, which then helps stabilize an organization that is experiencing transformation or uncertainty. And the ability for really good leaders to show that empathy and humility can really drive and empower individuals because they feel heard. You don't need to solve their problem in that instant, but the gift of your time and listening is extremely powerful, especially for many of the young Gen Zs that are entering the workforce right now, and for whom these turbulent times are their first work experiences. We're, as leaders, showing leadership and role models that we care about their first work experience as well. That it's, as Julia said so eloquently, there are businesses or people or whatever bringing humanity to the business. This is an example of how you can do that.
Yeah, and I did want to bring out the point, and I think we talked about this in sort of our prep session, that, when there's the lack of communication, and that could be very simple as the CEO is traveling all over, and that CEO has a reason and purpose for traveling, but there's not a lot of communication, that people tend to go negative. They think the worst, not potentially the best. And so it's just something as simple as we're traveling, we're looking for the funding, extra funding, or whatever that, reason is, that it can help ease the minds of individuals, especially the younger professionals, as you know, Maura. I think that's really important.
I want to add to what Maura said, if I may. She talked about open culture and getting feedback from employees. And I think that's one of the most important things that a leader can do, create an open and transparent culture. Especially when you try to do a transformation or introduce change, people have a lot of concerns. And they need a way to express it. Yeah. And if you listen as a leader, if you listen to these concerns, then that allows you to actually take actions. Usually these concerns are rooted in reality, and they speak to real obstacles in the way. And if you listen to these concerns as a leader, you can, take away the obstacles, remove the obstacles, and make the change smoother and better, because you listen and because you addressed concerns.
Excellent. Those are very good points. So I guess the next thing I'll pose, which is one of my favorite topics, is resilience and survival skills, which, feel like as many different economic downturns as we've all probably been through. I believe I've got the battle scars for all of them, but you continue to plow through, right? So resilience and survival skills they're kind of key to the self-awareness, but not just in individuals, not just in the leader. It's got to be also with the company as a whole. We've all talked about that, and to kind of ease the vulnerabilities and those gaps, and where might we have weaknesses in our resilience, and certainly any gaps in the self-awareness arena, if you will. So I'll talk about how, I guess the question would be, how might CEOs measure the level of resilience in the company and take these measures to help strengthen the skills? And I want to bring up one point, because the news today, Wall Street Journal, and it's been coming more and more, companies are onshoring a lot more. A lot of the onshoring that's happening is also driving a lot more technical innovation and using of robotics and AI. And so we also still have a little fear around, am I going to be needed in that? And I think this whole resilience and gap in skill sets really critical, because you still need people. So Maura, I'll start with you, since you were last on the questions last time. You want to share maybe some insights that and strategies around how do we actually measure and leverage, things that we could do?
Yeah, I think there are 2 points. And one is, it is picking up on the last conversation about communication and checking in and listening, one of the things that I often recommend to CEOs and leadership teams is, if you don't already do this, employ some sort of formal process to do employee satisfaction.
Mm.
You know, we have NPS scores and we do customer satisfaction and all those types of metrics, but it's really important to take a pulse of your organization, benchmark that, right? Have a baseline so that you can measure and trend your ups and downs through the organization. The other great thing about doing something like this is that it can also be there are introverts on our teams and people who don't like to come forward. So it can also be a way to give a voice to those who might not complain or raise their voices in an all company meeting or with their manager. And so it gives you an opportunity to, as Lisa suggested earlier, gather more data points that you can take action from. You might get some great ideas. I just recently did this with a client, and a need to create an educational stipend as a retention strategy for employees came out of such a survey. So you never know what kind of gem might come out of that. And again, it's just another avenue, another way to demonstrate that you are listening and that you care and that you can take action. The other thought I had is during those difficult economic times, companies do pivot. And it has been the case for companies from the inception of time, that you need to be malleable, you need to be nimble, and it's okay. It is really important, going back to what everyone said about mission and vision, it's really important to acknowledge this and normalize it to some degree for your team members, for your employees, because in the absence of that transparency leads to ambiguity, which leads to everything you were saying earlier, Teresa. People are going to fill ambiguity with their own worst fears. So I think it's very important to not necessarily position these as failures, but rather as a resilient, agile team or resilient, agile company that can shift with the environment.
Excellent.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'd like to add, it can also be how resilient your community is. And I mean, like the ecosystem, not only employees, but consumers and fans. You know, if that connection is strong, that also helps a company be more resilient. I know during the early days of COVID, there were companies that were having a really, really rough time and were on the brink of closing doors, and they had such a strong community. And when the community heard about this, they jumped in and helped. And now this one company in particular is just flourishing because of the strength of their community.
I think that's an excellent strategy. And even knowing, sometimes I think the inventory of who are your communities? How are we reaching them? You know, let's refresh, or do we need new ones? So Talila or Lisa, anything you guys want to add?
I wanted to talk about, so we talk about resiliency during change. As we change, we need to change. And you talked about onshoring and bringing new technologies. One of the things that come with change is that you realize that there is gap in skill sets. And so one important factor is, which I think needs to happen regardless of whether there is change or not. I believe in developing a growth plan for the organization, but also developing a personal growth plan for each individual. And updating this growth plan on a regular basis. This helps the organization because if there are skill set gaps, then you can offer training to the employees to get them up to speed in the in how and what they need to be productive and effective. But it also helps the employees because they continue to grow and develop. So I think this is a win-win to both the company and the employee, and it helps with resilience, it helps with growth, and it also makes people feel like,
Yeah.
somebody cares about them and invests in them. So
That's
that
good.
also helps motivation.
Absolutely. Lisa, you want to add anything?
That's right. Sure. I think, it ties back in with what folks were saying around, being open to hearing feedback and knowing your audiences. I was once, this was about 7 years ago, in an organization where we had to have a couple of layoffs. It was not a huge layoff, but we really had two distinct employee groups. One were folks that had been working in digital, maybe were primarily based in New York, and they'd seen this kind of thing before, right? So a lot of the thing about resilience is it is a little bit learned, right? It's hard to gift it to someone. And so the folks that had experienced this before, that had seen this in other companies, in their colleagues, whether or not it had happened to them, they were a little bit more sanguine about like, okay, this happened, and we'll be okay. And there was another group of employees that, had never been touched by layoffs and were absolutely devastated. And so really understanding your employee segments, however you segment that out, and attending to them, mindfully and individually, there's an overall message, right? There's context and communication and all of the things that everybody else highlighted. But I think also really being aware of, do you have distinct employee groups that you need to be aware of and really pay particular attention to, can also be really helpful. And as everyone said, right, make them feel seen and heard and understood and able to get through.
And that's an excellent point, and also a good transition, because I think the next thing that we had kind of talked through was that there are layoffs happening on one side, and sometimes it's certainly unavoidable. You've got to keep the company healthy, but it's important to make sure you're communicating effectively to those that are being laid off and help them, and then inside the company to ease fears that, am I next? Because that can also just stall work and stop me in my tracks. But on the other side of that, finding great talent, it's a great dichotomy, right? Finding great talent, everybody's still struggling with. So I think the question here is, these two things are certainly opposite. What do you feel some of the strategies could be to minimize these disruptions in, one, layoffs, but also two, if you're struggling to hire people, what are some things that companies could be doing or be thinking about differently here?
Well,
Anybody want to start?
Yeah, I have very strong feelings around sort of handling layoffs and being very planful and mindful. So what you don't want, right, again, you don't want rumors swirling around for a long time. You don't want layoffs sort of trickling out. I spoke with someone fairly recently who said to me, oh, I'm either laying off or firing someone every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, can you imagine? Everyone there is wondering, am I next?
Yeah,
you need to make a strategic plan and sort of execute with some precision so that people are not constantly wondering what's happening. And then, of course, we've all read about the sort of fails, right? This is not about you. It's not about how hard it is to lay people off. Unless you have, really legitimate security concerns, don't turn off somebody's access in the minute and per block them out the door, right? How do you handle this in a way that, because the people that are left can sometimes feel as disrespected as the people that are laid off. And so being really mindful, but also, again, as a leader, you've got to be really strategic. You have to be able to say to people, this is what we're doing now. And I think this will cover us for 6 months, a year, whatever you can predict. What does your runway look like? What does your default alive look like? So that people aren't wondering, is there something else in 6 weeks? Right. That uncertainty, it's a distraction, right? Not in a punitive, but just, people are human. And so I think that combination of strategy, deliberateness, and really, if you have to do it, you have to do it. But how do you do it in the most, elegant and respectful way possible to everybody who is involved can really make or break what
Right.
happens right after those layoffs.
I'll add one thing to that, because one experience that we had and actually helped the company through this is that in specific layoffs, we had helped identify the skill sets, because we do innovation and technology, but we also facilitated give them a fund. Maybe they want to go start their own company. So give a little stipend for them to go out and get on their feet, not just, whatever they're due, but something extra, so that if they want to go start a little company or they've got some headway that helps them. So there's so many different strategies that we could use. Anybody else want to add anything to this?
I'd love to. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Maura. Oh, go ahead, Maura.
I'd love to piggyback on what you just said, Teresa, because I think, when you're competing against, and specifically around retention of talent, right? So you're not turning over a talent.
Right.
We are, but also acquiring talent, we're competing against a lot of other companies. I've been trying to hire a lot of entry-level roles over the past year, and all things being equal, everyone's inflated that basic entry-level wage. So now we're competing on other things that make us exceptional, right? And when leaders start looking at the employee experience as though it is their internal customer experience, something special really happens, because you can start looking at what makes employees happy, what makes them loyal, what makes them trust the leadership and the company. It doubling down on that culture, but really taking a look at the employee experience as though it's the internal customer journey. And again, with this particular client, when we did that and we polled our employees, and after talking to so many candidates over the past year, we found what was valued was that sense of purpose and demonstrating that the company cares about the people. And so when a company demonstrates that investment in the people, and it could be the stipend that you're talking about, it could be an educational stipend to further your education, adopting that growth mindset. It could be looking at your PTO policy and how do you bring more balance, because we hear a lot more as a result of the pandemic. We hear a lot more about people wanting more balance in their lives.
Right.
What's really truly important to them. Now what you can do is you can actually, we're seeing this as a recurring theme, and when you can start to see is that it's a two-way street of demonstrating that trust and that security and that commitment and the loyalty, both to the individuals, but also from the individuals to the company.
Right. Excellent.
What I love about this conversation is it's about culture. And I think if we have to hire or we have to fire, we get so like, oh my God, we got to hire. Oh my God, we have to let people go. We get focused on that and not look at like, okay, what's the culture we need to create or protect in these instances, and be really intentional about that culture, because I think you can still, even in really hard times, you can still have a healthy, strong culture, and in the best of times as well.
Excellent.
I love this. Oh, sorry.
You love what?
I love this mention of culture,
Yeah.
because I think it's so important both in good and bad times. I think culture and values are part of the things that make people, stick and want to come. And one of the most important values that should be part of any culture is respect employees. And even during bad times, sometimes layoffs have to happen.
That's a good point.
But when they happen, you want to do it in a respectful way, that give the people that leave their, can help them, maintain their dignity, show them that they were valued during the time that they were with a company. And, sometimes there's no choice.
Yeah.
I worked with a company that for a few years, every quarter, there was a layoff. And it was not, as everybody said, it was not a good message, but the important thing was that everybody understood why it was happening, and everybody that was let go was it was done with a lot of dignity, a lot of appreciation. Managers were trying to help employees, find employment elsewhere, actively looking for employees. The company was putting, measures to help employees move on. So the feeling was that this is something that has to happen so the company can keep going, but we're doing everything we can, to minimize it and to help the employees. So I think this is so important, and this was part of the culture.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think this is so important. It makes things, I mean, I don't want to say it makes them better, but it makes them
Stronger. I think it makes them stronger.
Yeah.
And cultures can evolve and should evolve. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into evolving a culture because you've got to involve your people. You don't want to do it again out of, in a gap. So you definitely want to involve people, but sometimes it does require a look at your culture and thinking about what needs to change and engaging the people in that discussion. So I kind of
And
bring
having,
this.
and
Go ahead.
having the courage to
Yes.
change the culture, because you know what they say about what culture does to strategy.
Yeah. It's strategy for lunch.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. And cultures, we all know cultures change when you're taking in investment money. They change when I'm thinking I want to go IPO, even though a lot of companies are pulling back on IPOs right now. It changes completely after an IPO. Economic times, good times, bad times, you really want to look at a culture as well, because it does impact the company and everyone in it. So I think would come down to our last sort of discussion point. And that still goes back to a lot of the new hires that we're bringing on. Some of them the Z generation, and some not. Some of them are experienced people, but we're finding and reading a lot of stories where they're not getting the onboarding to set them up for success, and that there are more mistakes happening, some very critical ones at times. So I guess, how might companies take a different approach to talent and new hires these days, especially when things tend to cut back, and sometimes training is one of the first things to go. So what strategies might you guys have? And I'll just leave it up to one of you want to raise your hand and kick in some different approaches to talent and new hire these days.
I'd love to jump in on that one. Companies spend so much money and investment of time on acquiring and retaining their customers. They need to also, going back to what I said earlier, they need to do the same for their internal customers, which is their new hires and retaining their talent, their key talent. And sometimes you need to take a look at that entire internal customer journey, from the hiring and recruiting process all the way through onboarding, through training, and then the ongoing culture and operation, as everyone was saying. And the way to do this is to really look at every facet of that process. Recently, I worked with a client where we re-engineered everything from what their job postings look like, how they were describing themselves in order to get the right mix of people, but also looking at the process and creating a customer journey around the interviewing process, thinking about it as a customer journey, but then not ending. Many companies stop there. We actually sat down and looked at and created a curriculum for the first 2 weeks in a role, because the data shows that a lot of new hires will make a decision in the first couple of days whether or not they're going to stay with an organization long term. And so it's really important to double down on everything, the mission, the vision, the values, everything that you use to hire, bring those people into the organization, and and accelerate their trust and their commitment in the organization long term. So when we looked at the first 2 weeks, we actually broke it down and created a 2-week training plan with every hour mapped out, which may sound like overkill, but the other piece of it is people also need to be accountable and own their training as well. It needs to be a shared partnership between the new hire and the company as well. And so we built in daily goals. We built in daily check-ins. We built in mentors. We built in various tools. And we were able to compare before and after what the training and onboarding looked like before to what it looked like a year later. And we found that we were able to retain people. People weren't quitting in the first 2 weeks saying this is not the right fit for me.
Yeah.
And we found more long-term commitment to the organization. We created career paths so that people can see that their entry point into the organization is not their only role in the organization. They can see where they're going. And that speaks to what everyone was talking about earlier about purpose. They develop their own vision of where they can go within an organization. So I think investing in that internal customer employee experience is just as important as the external customer experience.
I love the fact that you're bringing the customer journey all the way down into the company through to the first person, the hires that you're making, which I mean, you're absolutely right. Everyone at some point in time is touching a customer or an experience the customer is going to have. Excellent. So, Julia, Lisa, Talia, do you have anything you want to add?
I recently evaluated a company that is going through exponential growth, which is a great problem to have, but all the middle managers that I talked with talked about growing pains. And when I dug deeper, it all was around onboarding and how they can absorb so much new talent when they were still when they still needed to do their everyday job and continue to deliver. And so the solution was, and so each one of them was spending time, thought, and effort on this separately, and a lot of time, effort, and not being very effective. So the solution was to create an overall company onboarding plan, because a lot of the things that they were struggling with were common to all of them. And by joining forces and creating one onboarding plan, they were, making their own time more efficient, making the new employees more efficient, and actually increasing, we could show that increased the productivity of the entire organization, because trying to not handling the new employees well was actually pulling down, the existing, the more experienced employees that had to help on an ad hoc basis. So at the end of the day, creating an onboarding plan really helped increase the entire productivity and the satisfaction of everyone, both new and existing.
Yeah. Lisa, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I think, when we think about those plans, and I love everything that both of you said, a thing that I like to think about a lot is the task level maturity, right, of the employee or the level. And so, I think sometimes it can be easy in a way for executives to forget what it's like to come in at an entry or lower level.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, oh, we'll just hire a bunch of entry-level people, right? They're relatively not super expensive, but if you don't give them the training and the supervision that they need, and if you don't have the resources to give them that training and supervision, you won't get the outcomes. And so just aligning sort of all of that resourcing to the levels that you're hiring for can be really key as well. And to Leela's point, there's sort of a formula that I like, and it's that at multiples of 3 and 10, right, your management and communication plans have to change. So, we're talking a lot about difficult times and cutbacks, right? I advised somebody who said, oh, we're going to hire 3 entry-level product people. And I said, no, you're not. Because why? Because they didn't have the training and supervision in place. So yeah, you'll get 3 people. For the same amount of money. I want you to hire 2 people that are a little more senior, that need less training and supervision, because for you, you'll have a better outcome. But if you're in, as Talila said, you're lucky to be in the growth mode, and now you have to get people in, at a very startup level. You've got 3 founders, they're sitting in a room, they just talk about stuff and everyone knows what's going on. And that's okay. You get 1 more and 1 more, and that's okay until you get to 10. And once you hit 10, you need a little bit of a different structure, management structure, communication, and that's okay till you get to 30. Right. And that's okay till you get to 100, and that's okay, and so you have to be really mindful of what are you loading on your team, right, as they're growing or as we're changing. And if it's the, we've retrenched a little bit, I think as leaders, we also have to say, we might need to do fewer things. What is really key? What is really important? And those are the things that we're doing, so that we're not loading people or spreading them too thin. It's not we have to do more with less. It's that we have to do smarter and better now that we have less.
Excellent. Julia, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think onboarding can be like drinking from a water hose. It's a lot of information. And I think we're like, let's get it to them as fast as possible. But it might be, let's do it in bite-sized chunks, and then make it as fun and engaging for the people who are onboarding and the people who are helping to onboard. I think that's when things stick, is when it's in bite-sized or in pieces of information that people can retain, and then make it really engaging and fun as much as possible.
Wow. So, I mean, these are just bringing up so many more questions I would love to tackle today. There's so many things and so much great help here. But I guess our time is about to end, and I want to give you each a chance to sort of give some closing thoughts. And so, Talila, I'll start with you. Do you want to offer any closing thoughts to our conversation today?
I just want to thank you. I really enjoyed this panel. It was a great conversation. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very, very welcome. And Julia, how about yourself?
Thank you. It's a great conversation. I loved it. I learned a lot as well, and I hope our audience did. And
So too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Lisa.
Well, I talked about finding through lines. So I think, the through lines and what everybody said were the importance of, mission and culture and respect and intentionality. Those things as underlying principles for leadership and for management really will go a long way. So I think I've been really just blessed to be part of this conversation. So thank you for having me, and thank to all of you.
You're welcome. And I do want to bring out the point. Technology wasn't mentioned, although we're all in technology. It doesn't start there. It is the facilitator to help things. So that culture vision, you're bringing up a great point. Maura, closing thoughts.
Echo what everyone said. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I learned a lot. I think I wrote down the 4 C's, Julia. That was brilliant. And I think at the end of the day, it's about people. And no leader can go wrong if through turbulent times, if they care about their people and just be human. Be human.
I so agree. And I thank you all. I mean, the talent around my Zoom screen is admirable, and I appreciate your time, and I know our audience will too. So thank you very much. And with that, we will, for Future Forward, we'll close our session.